Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Cerebral Palsy and Fitness podcast. I'm back here with Curtis, who is the host of the Uncovered Legacy podcast. We've actually had him before, where he shared his own journey in regard to his life, uh, his journey to coming to LA, and now today we have a pretty very special and educational episode uh, for him to talk about his grandfather. We're also going to cover a little bit about John Rivers. He's a former baseball player who played during the time of the Jim Crow era, and I hope this really enlightens and awakes people and makes people aware about really what was going on back in that during that time. So, Curtis, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you for having me back on your show.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. We were just discussing this off the pod a
hmm
little bit to start off the podcast. I know you were talking to me about your grandfather who served as a police officer back in the day. So can
hmm
you share with me a little bit about your grandfather and what he used to do?
Yeah. So, like myself, he was Walter Burke Senior. He was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and in 1950 they had four black police officers inducted again into the city of Charleston police officer team. It was the first four after Reconstruction, and it was exciting, but it reminds you also they lived in a downtown Charleston, which was all black community at that time, and for you to have four inducted in 1950. So who was doing the policing before them is a question, and how much policing were they really allowed to do? But
Right.
that is a huge accomplishment and something that um a lot of people looked up to him for that, I believe. I've heard stories of adults now, but just back then to see someone that looked like them with a badge on, it changed the community.
Do you have any statistics concerning like what was the graduation rate among African Americans being a part of the police academy and being a police officer?
So good question. I mean, for they were the first four, and they were called the original four in 1950, I believe. So I don't believe it was any. I think they were the first ones
Wow.
before recon. They always say before Reconstruction, so I don't know what that means. If there was someone of color who maybe before was, but as far as we know, and I know that they were the first ones in the county of Charleston.
And who kind of encouraged them to become a police officer? Do you know any of that information?
I don't know what encouraged him. I believe the opportunity came to him. He was not college educated, but he was well known in the community. He also was a Mason, and so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. And just being a pillar in the community, maybe they looked for him and these other four gentlemen to like lead the way. But I know I've heard stories of people, and I know we'll talk about this later, like even Mr. John Rivers, who we were talking about, he was telling me a lot of stories about how just seeing him in that uniform and how that was something new for them because they had never seen a black police officer before. Um, so that was, just to have someone who is for the community, policing the community, but also protecting the community was something that we take for granted, I think, today.
I know it's like you think about back then and now, and it's funny because now we're bringing officers back in the spotlight, but it doesn't seem like
hmm
it's in a good way. You're talking about you're
hmm
bringing back racial disparity again, especially with like Black Lives Matter and what happened with George Floyd, and it
hmm
made me think. We were just talking about this earlier. Do you
hmm
think there was a like a double standard, like maybe like since you were the first four police officers, you might have seen the same thing but with a white individual, and they would have been like, oh, they're like not the best, and they want to do everything they can in their power to overthrow what whatever kind of authority that he might have had back in the day, right?
Mhm.
Because I mean, you said he might have not had much at all, but he had some.
Right. I mean, it definitely was a double standard. I think we all can realize that where um, he was not allowed to make any mistakes, where other police officers probably had that privilege of being able to not even walk a thin line to do what they wanted to do. So for him and the other four, I'm sure it was the tone was set in depending on how they handled the pressure of discrimination. It a lot of people they were the gatekeepers, so they had a lot of pressure of the next generation, and depending on how they handle it. And I know
Right.
I've heard stories of they weren't allowed to. I think he was the first one to be able to drive a police car, so it was
Uh,
like little things like that. And they definitely could not arrest a white man. But a
wow.
white police officer could definitely arrest a black man. I did know that. So it was certain rules like that where you could only police
Exactly.
people who looked like you, but it was a no-no.
Mhm.
Like you definitely were not allowed to, even as a police officer. I mean, today it's changed, but I can't imagine you're trying to go by the rules of the land of the law, and but that does not apply to everyone when they're breaking the law. So it's almost like you're a
So
police officer, but there's certain people that are higher ranked than you still without a badge.
right, right. So because there was segregation, did they have their own precinct, or did they quarrel among the white officers, like in the same building?
They were they were in the same precinct as it was the downtown Charleston precinct, so they were in the same precinct as the white officers, but they patrolled the black areas only.
Oh, so wow. So
Mhm.
they couldn't even set foot in a white neighborhood. That's
Oh no,
wow.
that would have that would have got them locked up. so
Wow. So you mean to tell me that they're able to be in the same precinct as officers, but they couldn't
Mhm.
step in the same neighborhood? Wow,
Right.
that's mind-boggling.
That that would have probably got their
Like you
badge
would think,
taken
right?
immediately, right? And you kind of had
But
to. It was a delicate line because you are trying to make open the door for other people, and so it's a lot on your shoulder. You're the first, but you don't want to be the last. So, and because of that, if you know that, then it's a thin line that you have to walk.
and like could they like considering that you had a variety of restaurants, events, and things around the community, like what if there was a situation where you had to have all patrol like on deck? Would that be a moment where they have to be all together, or that just couldn't happen? Like if somebody were to rob a restaurant and it was in a white
Mhm.
neighborhood, but you only had a black officer available, or you had
I don't think
multiple black
I don't
officers.
think the blacks officers would have been allowed to go. I think they were supposed to stay in their area, and at that time, down to and even today, it's still predominantly black. But especially back in those days where you were not allowed, you would not have white people most likely were not in the downtown area unless they was shopping or some kind of activity. But I don't believe they would have been allowed to police a white man or a white woman, regardless of what they were doing. They definitely would have to call for backup. so
So in other words, you kind of during that time, even if you were in a position of authority, being that you were
mhm,
black, you were still faced with racial disparity and the disrespect among the other
mhm,
race.
mhm,
you know and I'm pretty sure that he also faced a lot of scrutiny behind it, like why would they employ him as a police officer knowing that he's a minority. But it seems like he himself never let it stop him. He really wanted to make a difference.
mhm. I think he could see from what I like to think is that he saw a bigger cause, and it is not just about me; it's about the future. And so I think when you
The
know
future.
that sometimes you have to bear down, you have to have discretion. You have to sometimes wait for your turn. But being in that position is something that was even unheard of when you're considered the first. And when you're the
Right.
first, all eyes are on you. So I'm sure it was very hard, but at the same time, it probably was rewarding to know that you had the opportunity to change a situation that should have been changed a long time ago. But at the same time, I'm sure they understood that their place as also. I feel like it might have been, you know, I don't know if it was a forced situation where they felt like they had to hire a black police officers, but I'm sure it was
Right.
scary times.
Do you think your grandfather today would be proud of how much society has changed since then?
I think he will. I think he will be proud. I think it's twofold, right? I think he would be proud of, having a black president, which is something that I never thought even be in my time. I think having people of color in Congress and having black police officers um, in uniform, but I also think he would be understand it's very scary times for us as well. So I think, yes, I think there would be a lot of things that he could look at and be very proud of.
If you were to see him face to face today, what would you tell him?
What would I tell him, David? I think I would ask him the same questions that you were asking um, me, and just want him. I would hopefully he would be proud of all of us. We've heard these stories growing up with his legacy and the impact that he's had in Charleston, even today. Um, and I would like for him to know that he did a good job, and because of him, a lot of us are where we are today.
Has he been? I know there's a lot of there's a I don't know if it's like a Hall of Fame or something for officers, or like how they
Mhm.
recognize certain officers. Is there somewhere where they've actually recognized the four officers, like in a museum or anything like that in Charleston?
There is a museum in Charleston, but I don't believe they have been in the museum. I know, like, for Black History Month, I saw like the Charleston precinct did like have a picture of him at one point, but I don't
Oh,
believe they're in the Charleston Museum. I know there's been some talk of trying to get them in there, but I don't believe they are, which
yeah,
would
they
be
should.
awesome. Yeah, just
It's a big part of history.
having that.
It's very integral.
Right, right. And it would be good to have that. I mean, to have the original four, as they were called, would be an honor.
Yeah, it would be fantastic, not only for the community but for you to see that there was somebody
Hmm.
there that you could I mean, I don't want to put words in my mouth, but you call a hero, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would love to see that. And maybe that's something we need to push for. Get on board. So
Do it.
I may have to look. I might have to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, reach out to your local congress there in Charleston, start
Hmm.
make even you can even start a petition. Start that and have
Hmm.
people sign it and then send it to them and, show them how much it means to you.
I agree. We have to start that charge. Yep.
Yes. It all starts with you. That's how the changes
Right.
start.
One
You have to put
conversation,
that
and here
first
we
step
are.
in. Yes,
That's
already.
right.
One conversation. That's how it starts.
That's
Speaking
it.
about conversation, I know you had a conversation with John Rivers, being that
Yes.
he was one of the African Americans and played baseball back in
Mhm.
1955, was it?
Mhm. So, Mr. Rivers, I interviewed him on my podcast, and his story is connected to my grandfather's story. Um, they were four black baseball teams, and they call themselves, it was the 1955 Cannon Street, part of the YMCA,
Oh, okay.
and they were only allowed to play against each other or other black teams. And so my grandfather, not only was he a police officer, but he was a head coach of one of those teams.
Wow.
Um, and
Cool.
Mr. Rivers was on one of the four also, which was a different team. Well, long story short, they were, after 2 years, they were able to get a charter. And once you get a charter, you're able to in play in the playoffs to go to like the World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And Mr. Rivers was as part of the All Star team, and my grandfather was the assistant coach for the All Star team. And basically, once they got the charter, you were teams were didn't want to play against them, so everybody kept not showing up or just refused to play against them. And so it was scary times. But because they had a charter, they could not force them to. They were allowed to play against the white teams in short, but they none of them wanted to play. So they kept forfeiting the games and forfeiting the games and forfeiting the games. And it got so bad where like the KKK got word of this black all-star team that
Wow.
was trying to play against white teams. And so the Little League was not having any of it. And they were supposed to go to like Rome, Georgia. They forfeited. They were supposed to go to Greenville, South Carolina, and they were told not to come. And I believe the KKK was there, and it was probably going to be really bad for them if they had showed up, if they even made it there. They ended up, because the teams were forfeiting, they went all the way to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where the All-Star Little League team has always played, and of course the teams forfeited against them too. Of course, the children, these you're talking 12 and 13-year-old little boys, I'm sure they would have played, but the parents would not allow them to play against a black baseball team. And so the story kept getting it blew up, and people found out about it, and it just made the papers and things like that. And so they ended up being honored later on as the championships of the 1955 Cannon Street All-Star team later on.
That is awesome, and I'm pretty sure. I know back then a lot of players probably faced a multitude of challenges. From transportation to lodging
Mhm.
to playing in
Mhm.
certain areas. Like you said, they were completely shut out, and
Mhm.
they couldn't play. And I don't know if you know this, but Jackie Robinson used to
Mhm.
live here and play here in Sanford, Florida.
I think I did know that. Yes.
Yeah, so his house is here in Sanford. There, he has a house turned
Oh
into a
wow.
museum. Yeah,
Oh wow, I didn't. So it's a historical figure. I mean, I feel like unfortunately you have some of these stories, and Mr. Rivers, he was great in enlightening me, and I think they were unaware of how much danger that they were really in as little boys. They just wanted to play
right.
baseball. And so it was their first real introduction of discrimination and racism and how it looks. And it's not pretty, it's not fair. And there's people out here that really hate you because of the skin of your color. And he talks about how after that experience, most of the players, they all went their separate ways, and they didn't talk about it again. Um, until like he said, until like in college, or one of his teammates. But the story was revisited again by someone named Gus Holt, who found the archive of the story, and brought the players back together to relive and try to fight for justice for them. And so Mr. Rivers is passionate about it. There's been a book out, um, Stolen Dreams. There's been another book out for it. Can't remember the name of that one, but it's been a lot of stories out regarding their story and their legacy.
And speaking about baseball, like you look at the landscape of baseball today, and then when it comes to African American ball players, you don't really see
Mhm.
very many. It's very, very slim. Like I could think about one or maybe three off the top of my head that are that were African American. I
Mhm.
think Patrick Mahomes. Senior,
Mhm.
Russell Wilson, Dontrell Willis, who
Mhm.
pitched for the Miami Marlins, and
Yeah,
I think that's it I could think of. Yeah.
when I think of baseball now, it is the heart of America, but now it's becoming, I think more of us focus on football and basketball, but in a lot of times you find a lot of baseball players are from like the islands. You find Cuba and Dominican
Hmm.
Republic are recruited heavy now, so the dynamic has changed in how it looks. It's still America's first love, I feel like, but it doesn't get the same exposure as a lot of other sports. And also, I think as far as kids of color, black and brown, we may not have access to those parks. Basketball, is easier to find a basketball and a basketball court, but a lot of times we don't get the exposure because once you get to high school, baseball is expensive.
Oh yeah.
Like you it's a very expensive sport and it's very competitive. And so if you don't get that exposure as a little kid, a lot of times you're not making these major these all-star teams.
Yeah, it's all about the how you are economically, and
Mhm.
it's difficult nowadays. Everything is going up. The cost of everything now.
Mhm.
The cost of
It,
housing, everything you need or want to do, you can't really access that easily anymore.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really
And
get exposed. Go ahead.
you add the racial disparity behind it. That makes it even tougher.
Mhm. It is. It's very I feel like it's like an exclusive club. I mean, when we moved to Georgia from Charleston, I remember it was really hard to get into baseball. I mean, you had to like have known about the sport for a while. It was long lines to like even get on a team. And so I think, when you're in a working class, people don't have that kind of time. So um that's why other sports become more popular, I think.
I think so. I think so too. And I hope
Mhm.
over time we start to see that shift in how things are, and there's more access to any sport, and better opportunities for all. I don't know if I told you, but this is a great conversation to bring this up. But I used to do youth mentoring for a kid for at-risk boys, and the
Oh.
majority of my boys are boys of not just the Latino community but of color. And
Mhm.
being an advocate or a mentor, these kids that I used to work with, they came from homes that were broken. Both parent, the father may not have been present in their life. Their mother may not have been there. Uh,
Mhm.
they could have been in and out of jail. Kids were getting into fights, suspended, a lot of referrals, expulsion. And then my position was as a mentor. If a kid got in trouble, wasn't necessarily to get them out. It was more of like to guide them in the right direction, like to show them that okay, so you do this happens, but if you follow my guidance as your big brother, hence my brother's keeper. I don't know if you heard of that
Right.
organization before, but it was a great organization to work for. I did it for 2 years, and some of these kids, I took some kids that were like not really encouraged about themselves to being confident and showing them that there's so much more than just a kid and so
Mhm.
much more than just a color or a statistic. They're human,
Mhm.
capable of
Mhm.
doing things beyond measure.
Yeah, I think even little things like that, David, you'd be surprised how much when the pressure comes to these children as they grow up, they can pull back and remember words that you've said, um, or even like you talked about, like Mr. Rivers or his experience with knowing my grandfather or my grandfather being a police officer or just being in a community and having one person believe in you. It can make the difference for you, make a
Absolutely.
bad situation worse. So,
And you had mentioned something about Mr. Rivers. He does architecture, and he's I think one of the only 2,500 in the Charleston area.
So he, oh man, I forgot the statistics, but it is he's an architect and he's helped build the monument, the Martin Luther King Monument Center in downtown Charleston. He worked on the Atlanta airport, um, and he's a consultant too. He's working with me on some projects that I'm trying to do. He's a consultant for me, a mentor, and just seeing someone like Mr. Rivers and that kind of work is rare. Um, it's not too many black architects out here, so I forgot the statistics number, but it's very few. Um, so yeah, I mean, you just never know how people are going to help you in life, and real estate is very important. Owning land is very
Right.
important, and just hearing him talk about it is expiring, and the fact that it's we're 3 generations apart, but here we are together. He's on, he's helping me. He's been on my podcast. He's telling me stories about my own family that I was unaware of, and he's helping me, um, hopefully develop land one day. So I'm always
It's
bothering Mr.
awesome.
Rivers. So yeah.
That's why having a mentor is so important in your life, because you never know
Mhm.
the way that they'll change it
You
for you.
you never know. You never know how who is gonna be
And
that,
I'm
who is gonna make that change.
right, and I'm sure you're extremely grateful and extremely happy that he's there to really help shape the future for you. You know,
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, he's impacted my life in ways that I didn't realize, and I'm sure my grandfather impacted his life, and vice versa. He impacted his life too, being a good baseball player for him. Um, I remember him telling me stories about how I think too the reason they were even able to travel to Williamsport is because of these coaches were leaders in the community, and my grandfather being a police officer, I'm sure he was, that helped as well. um so it was scary times, but they had the right people to protect them as well.
that's what it's all about. The right
Hmm.
people, and having the right mindset. And it seems like you're going in the right direction.
I hope so,
Keep it
brother. I
up,
hope
and
so.
and and hey, and the good thing is you're passing it down to your own children, which is going to be great, because they'll learn from a great mentor and a great person like you.
Thank you, David. I received that.
Definitely, I mean that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Well, hopefully I can they can say positive things about me. I know it's a long road being a new parent, and as I'm finding out right now, but that is the goal. So yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely keep doing what you're doing, and I definitely enjoyed this episode today with you, and that we definitely have to keep getting at it. We might find different other topics to talk about eventually on top of what we're discussing today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on again, and you being a guest on my podcast. And you never know how two people are
Yeah.
going to meet and how those worlds come together. But you being in Florida, me being in Los Angeles, we still have no excuse not to keep the communication going and to find better
Yes.
ways to help other people physically and mentally.
Yeah.
So yes,
And like I said, if we want to get the the first four African American police officers really recognized, as with anything in general, it all starts
hmm
with you wanting to make that change, making that first step.
yes, stepping stones. I agree.
Always, always. Well, thank you again, Curtis. Thank you to my wonderful audience, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Um, Curtis, you have any last words, any piece of advice, anything for us?
I just want to say I think you're doing an awesome job of what you're doing, and all of our stories are different but somewhat connected. And I appreciate you for your platform and bringing my family and parts of my family legacy to life again. And hopefully, it will change other people. And these stories need to be remembered so they will never be repeated. And thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure, and I always uh I always learn new things every time I talk to each guest, whether a first time, a repeat, uh,
Mm,
anyone. Like I said before, it's a platform where it's non-judgmental. I'll have
mhm.
anybody on here. You don't have to worry about being judged because it's at the end of the day, it's like you have a family on top of family. It's your
Mhm.
podcasting family, your own family. You got your friends. That's what we're there
Right.
for. You know,
E exactly.
we're here to help build each other up.
That's it.
That's what it's all about. So, Curtis, once again, thank you, and happy to have you back on.
Thank you, David.
All right, you guys. So you can find this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and every other major podcasting outlet out there. And as always, until next time, stay safe and stay blessed. Have a wonderful day.